Right, welcome back, Lelanders. Today we're going to have a special deep dive episode about the Magi Wing Disc. We just released a short, like 3 minute version of this video yesterday. Would it be January the 12th? And I was a little bit worried that it would do really well, and that I'd be too nervous to release more of this information because it's just really too personal. But thank God the video ratings just tanked. We only got like maybe 10 people that watched it, so I'm not really too worried as much to make this video. So for the 10 people that are watching, thank you for sticking with me and watching this. I've got a big major surgery coming up this week, and I figured what better time to get it out. I was going to stay up and watch TV and sports and stuff, but I'm like, hey, if not to make fun of the surgery or anything, but I might be in really rough shape and not have another chance to make this video. So I figure we'll do it now. And it's kind of a little bad timing if anyone's telling my voice is a little bit quieter than I usually yell. My wife actually has her first day back to work tomorrow, and she's trying to sleep just a few feet from me. So she normally falls asleep every time she hears me talk anyways, so I'll try to keep my voice a little bit low. And yeah, let's see. And we'll start off the deep dive by addressing one of my favorite comments from the trailer or the short 3 minute yesterday. So the comment is from Cal Hall. He says, "This is a bunch of delusional bullshit, like all things religious and spiritual." So I promised Cal, I was like, hey, just wait till you see the deep dive. This was more of a trailer. But no, if you're wondering why I started with a comment like that, my old days when I used to, or younger days when I used to do talk radio, they say when you have someone who takes the time out of their day to watch your material and insult it, it's actually a good sign that it wasn't that bad. So thanks, Cole. I really appreciate it. And I'm one of those people where when I get a kick in the butt, it's more of a motivator than people just saying, oh, you're doing such a good job, doing such a good job. Not that I ever hear that. So anyways, I'll try not to laugh and make this a little bit more serious. And what time is it? Around 10 o'clock at night. We'll try to wrap it up before midnight. We'll make it a feature-length film. Alright, so yeah, we'll close that comment. Thanks a lot, Cal. And we'll also discuss some more positive comments, maybe near the end of the video. Those are more of ass-kissing, so I want to start off with some really hard-hitting material. Alright, now not to make fun of the comments being nice to me, but alright, we'll start with the shorts, I think, what we covered yesterday. And then from there, we'll just add in some of the longer form material. So here we have Ahura Mazda, or the wing disc symbol that a lot of people are more familiar with what it's called. And really my whole story didn't really begin here. I was going to change my shirt for this episode. I'm like, hey, it kind of matches the gold of the wing discs, no? So we'll go with the gold or orange t-shirt. Or yellow, not orange. Alright, so we'll guess we'll begin where this whole thing really did start for me. And let's bring it up next. Right, so when I was about 10 years old, I used to have a bad habit of like sneaking out of the house and getting in trouble. So me and my friend Denny or Dennis, he was with me for this weird experience. We were going through our backyard and kind of like in a downtown setting, but you know how sometimes downtowns have like forested and parks and whatnot? Well, it just so happened that my backyard at the time backed out onto a park, and we were sneaking out through the house at around maybe midnight or so to try to get to a fort that we had built in the backyard. We were kids, like 10 years old, and we were going to do some construction work and stay up all night working on it because our base or our fort kept getting attacked by other kids. So we wanted to try to get an up edge on them. So as we were walking out through our backyard, we happened to have this weird encounter where we were like only about halfway through my yard. Everything's pitch black, and all of a sudden we happened to glance over our shoulders to see what was in the neighbor's yard, and these things were there. And this is only like an artist rendition. Can't remember who drew this. Oh, and that's the other thing I should mention too, is I've actually had quite a few injuries and my memory is almost completely shot. So when I'm going through these slides, a lot of them I've made, a lot of them I just got gleaned off the internet, and I can't remember where a lot of them came from. And even the ones I made, it's almost like looking at them again for the first time. So this will kind of be like a refresher for me and for the viewers as well. So just a shout out to all the people who made these images other than the ones that I did. And sorry that I'm not able to like totally give out the proper, what is it called, accreditation. So if anyone's like, hey, my image was in there, take it down, just let me know and I'll take it out, or accredit it, whatever you'd like. Either way, I'm not a big stickler for that. And likely there's only going to be like 10, maybe 20 people that watch this, so as far as I know. Although the last time someone made fun of my videos, sort of like Cal, it ended up going viral. Like over 10,000 people watched it after I got like reamed out with insults. So you never know, right? So anyways, we encountered these light beings, and I'll try to summarize it quick. They showed us a few things, and they didn't talk to us, and then they also left me a little gift in the form of a coin. And the coin will cover quite a bit in the episode. Now, one of the things they showed me is that these light beings, they're sort of like, how would you say it, in another realm or dimension that's all around us. And if I had to guess, there's like millions or even billions of these things all around us right now. Sort of like that Star Trek episode where life forms are existing just out of phase. So they were showing me, hey, it's like they have another realm, and they peeled back the layers of our reality and showed like, hey, look what our realm looks like. And it's almost like a mirror image of ours. And we'll cover the mirror imaging parts in a few slides coming up. So I figured that's where I would begin, is just saying like, hey, at around 10 years old, I saw these weird things, and I kind of made my life dream or my purpose to try to figure out and solve the mystery of what the hell happened, right? Oh, and the other thing they showed us is that they have the ability to control us, sort of like the Matrix. They can control our universe, like, you know that movie, was it Dark City, or yeah, Dark City? They can like pause our universe and hit play. It was almost like we're a simulation and they're the real entities. So that was a little bit of a wild experience to see that. And it was really difficult to describe to people because at like 10 years old, I didn't know anything about The Matrix. The movie hadn't been out yet. The movie Dark City hadn't been out yet. So a lot of this stuff, yeah, it was like way over my head. And now that I'm getting closer to 50 years old, not much further at all to go, that more of it makes like slightly more sense. I'm hoping that I get to live for a few more decades and get to make even more sense of it, but we'll just cover what I can gather at this point. Alright, so that's where it began. And then while I was researching those light beings, I found different names for them. And one of the names I happened to come across is from like the Zoroastrian, or the ancient religion of this winged disc. And they called them the Amesha Spenta, or basically the Holy Immortals. Basically the creatures that control heaven or live in heaven that don't really live or die. So the Amesha Spenta, there wasn't literally a whole lot more information, because if anyone knows the Zoroastrian religion, their holy book, the Avesta, has basically been lost to time. They only have like little verses of it left, almost like, I don't know how much percent is left. Viewers can put it in the chat if they know, but from what I'm gathering, only about 2% of the book has actually survived to modern times. For all we know, someone has a full copy and they're hiding it, but that's what we know. And there was one person, when I was like gleaming on the internet to try to find who else has wrote information about these Amesha Spenta, and that's where I came across our couple slides here. This. It turns out in this book, there's a whole verse about the Amesha Spenta, and it's written by Albert Pike. And at the time, I didn't really know who Albert Pike was, had never heard of him, and I'm like, oh, he wrote some really interesting stuff about the Amesha Spenta. And I was like, wow, it's like maybe this guy is a pretty smart guy. I wonder what else he's into. So then I happened to find this book and read the cover and noticed he's into Ahura Mazda and the secret meaning to Freemasons. So I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting. I don't think I got that slide ready, but turns out Albert Pike his burial tomb is in the center of a place in Washington D.C. called, what is it, the House of the Temple, I believe. If someone can put it in the chat below. I know some people debate whether he's not even there, but according to Wikipedia, he was at the time. So I don't know if they've moved his body or what happened, but at least at one time he was like entombed in like this Washington D.C. layout that makes like a giant pentagram all over the actual streets of D.C. So it's pretty wild. Maybe I'll get into sharing that slide another time. It's kind of sad that I didn't have it ready, but don't want to spend all day getting slides ready. And I think I described it pretty good. So we covered that what is it, the Freemasons and Albert Pike and all that jazz is basically how I got into researching more of the Amesha Spenta. And sadly, the book that I got here is actually only like one chapter out of a much larger book. And I wanted to buy the much larger book, but it costs like thousands of dollars. So I was like, oh geez, this little excerpt from Amazon was all I could afford. But I think, who knows how much of the rest of the book actually talks about the Amesha Spenta. If anyone's read the whole book and they want to let me know in the chat, that'd be sweet. Save me a bit of time. Alright, so the next phase in my life, we'll skip back a little bit. I was watching America on Earth by Scott Walter, and he happened to be talking about Phoenician tablets, and he showed this one, I believe, on his show. And that winged disc symbol really stood out to me, because I can't remember if I had seen the book cover at that point. I'm getting a few things mixed up, because this has been quite like an entire lifetime journey, and I'm sure I'm going to get some things in the wrong order. But yeah, I saw the winged disc on the Phoenician tablet, and there happened to be a Sumerian exhibit at the ROM Museum in Toronto. So I'm like, okay, I'm into the winged disc and this ancient stuff, so I'm going to go to the ROM and see what they got. So obviously I don't think this is even a Sumerian tablet. I believe this could be like an Akkadian one from 800 BC, roughly. But we're just going to use it as an example because I didn't actually take any pictures of the ROM that day. Sadly, it's the coolest exhibit I've ever seen. Now I just have to go by memory. But anyways, when we were there at the ROM, it was me and my brother, we happened to see this really cool winged disc symbology on one of the tablets they were displaying for the Sumerians. And I was like, wow, that winged disc is really sweet. I wish there was someone I could ask more information. And it just so happened to be one of the museum people's there, and he's like, hey, you're not allowed to take pictures of these certain ones or whatever. So I happened to ask him, I'm like, so I've seen this winged disc on Phoenician tablets before, and now I'm seeing it on the Sumerian one. I'm like, is this actually the same winged disc? Is it like the sun, or what do you think? And he goes to me, he's like, how did he phrase it? He's like, officially, there's no connection whatsoever that these winged discs are related in any way. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess I was way off, right? And then he's like, but, he's like, unofficially, he's like, oh, these things are the exact same, beyond any shadow of a doubt. I was like, well, man, that's really weird, right? Like, what's the big deal? Like, why don't people want, like, everyone to know that these winged discs are connected? And what's the big controversy? Why does the museum have to say officially they're not related at all, right? So that's the next phase of the journey. Alright, let's see. Where else did we leave? We got the Phoenician. Alright, so then when it came time to looking at other exhibits in the museum, sadly when you see these really blurry pictures, I got these from one of the worst photographers you'll ever see. Me. Now I took these pictures and my camera sucked at the time. I don't know if it's even much better now, but I'll try to get back to the museum to take better ones. But anyways, so this interesting winged disc symbology came up, and they actually had it listed as Zoroastrianism. So I was like, wow, that's really weird. And like I always thought that Zoroaster and the Persian or ancient Iranian religion wasn't really, how did I phrase that? Not really connected. But then it shows here in the museum that they were. And then I looked more into it and I found out that Zoroaster is actually accredited to bringing back the ancient Sumerian religion and reviving it from the dead, so to speak. and he had never actually seen any of the tablets himself. I was like, wow, that's really weird, right? Like, how did Zoroaster, like, maybe because he's a prophet, that he was able to foresee stuff from the past or the future, or either way. So I was like, yeah, maybe that's how he did it. So we'll cover that in more detail as we go. Okay, so next what I think I'll do is I'll bring up the Zoroastrian slides, and I have a little bit more in a deep dive for those. So that's what we'll do next. Just try to remember, sorry, my memory's completely shot, that I can't remember stuff from like 30 seconds ago. So we'll try to, we'll bring up some more of the Zoroastrian stuff. Okay. So if anyone's heard of like the royal family, I think they were in charge of Iran or Persia. Could be getting it wrong, maybe Iran. They happen to have this guy, and he's carrying the winged disc sword, which I thought that was always really cool. Well, putting the winged disc and the sword, you can almost see like the sword hilt goes through the ring and the wings. And I thought that was a really wild symbol. We put it on today's show. And if anyone hasn't really heard of like the Zoroastrians before, maybe we should cover that a little bit. We'll open up this one next. The Zoroastrian Fire Temple. So how I got involved with the Zoroastrians, at this point I knew that like Zoroaster and the Zoroastrian religion knew some information about the Amesha Spenta, because Albert Pike had written about it. I don't know if Albert Pike, where he got his information from as well, because when you think about it, in Albert Pike's day and age, like that was quite a while ago, I don't think he had the same access to, like, obviously not the internet, and maybe even the libraries that he had access to would be a little bit more limited. But then again, he was apparently one of the highest ranking Freemasons that wrote like a lot of the books of how Freemasonry used to operate before it was modernized, from what I hear. Not actually a Freemason myself, for now. But, so anyways, yeah, I was like, hey, these Zoroastrians, they're actually in Ontario. If anyone's familiar with Ontario, I'm not talking about Ontario, California, but the Ontario in Canada. It's a province, the one with Toronto and Ottawa and stuff in it. So apparently the Zoroastrians, they faced a lot of persecution when they were living in, what would it be, Iran? I'm not sure if it was Islamic persecution or just persecution in general, but yeah, so basically they ran and they set up some fire temples in Toronto. And lo and behold, it was kind of funny. I lived in a smaller city about an hour outside of Toronto where I saw the light beings. And it just so turns out where I saw the light beings was like a couple blocks away from a school. And it's a Roman Catholic school. And we used to share our desks. And you're thinking, well, that's weird. How can you share your desks with other students? It just so happens that the Zoroastrian students, they would come in and use our desks on the weekends. So obviously, like, normal kids, or not to say normal, but people attending normal or regular classes, they only go Monday to Friday. And it just so happened that a friend of mine, I think it was Paul, he had found one of the flyers from their religion that they had left in his desk. So he took it out and he showed it to me. He's like, isn't this guy weird? He looks just like Jesus. And we'll cover the comparison of those. I don't think I have the comparison, but this one's pretty close. I did make a comparison slide, but sadly I didn't get that one ready either. I've got like millions of slides, so I tried to just pick a few. So this is a picture here of Zoroaster. You can see some of the influence of like the ancient Sumerian stuff in the artwork, and it has a lot of the ox. And we'll cover more of the ox. If you've seen in the trailer, you know where we're going here. But the ox, this golden ox, like, it's fitting that they painted it golden, I believe is the same pagan religion that Noah's ancestors, like if anyone's familiar with the Bible, when Noah would have his ancestors talked about, they would say that if they stopped, like if God stopped communicating with them for any amount of time, they would always go back to worshiping the golden ox religion. And I was like, what is this golden ox religion? And that's when I started to realize that this pagan golden ox religion just so happens to be maybe other religions as well, but also connects to the Zoroastrians. They worship with the golden oxes. They have the fire temples that the Bible teaches are taboo. But this is also what Noah's family practiced all the time, the second that God would leave them alone. And like sometimes I guess God would leave for a week or a month, and he would come back and he'd be like all pissed. You bastards, you're worshiping the golden ox again. As soon as I left you just for a few minutes, right? It's sort of like when the parents leave and the kids get in trouble. I'm not sure who the guy is on the left. If anyone wants to tell me who that is, that'd be a great help too. Alright, so we covered the Zoroastrians and how I got involved with them. Oh yeah, just because they were sharing my desk at my school. I didn't actually get to meet any of them, but I started to get really keen on meeting them because I'm like, hey, these Zoroastrians are really cool. I want to learn more about them. And it turns out one of them ended up buying or almost bought a PlayStation VR off me when I was trying to sell it, but we'll get around to that another episode or never. And yeah, so the Zoroastrians, I started to talk to them online. So I figured they do have a fire temple in Toronto, but they had membership fees to join. I was like, I'm really broke all the time. Like I've basically lived my whole life in poverty. And I'm like, I don't have the money to join the Zoroastrian fire temple in Toronto. So what I'm going to do to try to get more information is just join the groups on Facebook, because at least those were free to join. So I ended up talking to one of these guys. If anyone knows what the Zoroastrian priests are called, I can't remember the name of them, but there were some elders that actually were answering questions on their Facebook page. So I started to ask them questions, and we got into chatting, and they happened to, I asked a question, it was one of the scenes they had posted, how there was like the spirit of knowledge and how someone had traveled to battle it, and then they had some battle or something. And then I asked the elder, I'm like, hey elder, like how did this person actually travel to battle the spirit of knowledge? And he's like, wow, he's been teaching Zoroastrian for I forget 50 years or whatever he said. And he said no one's actually ever asked him that. So he's like, since no one ever has, and I'm so intrigued by your curiosity, that he's going to let me in on his secret. And I'm like, a secret? Ooh, this could be good, right? So he tells me that it turns out the Zoroastrians don't talk about it too much, but they actually have a shamanic element to their religion. And he was saying that he believed that they ingested this sacred plant that used to be popular in like Asia, or not Asia, Persia or Iran or ancient Iran before it was called that. So he's like, yeah, they were ingesting this plant, a hallucinogen, and that's how he did it. So I was like, holy, like that's quite a wild secret. And then he's like, oh, by the way, like how did you ever get so involved in Zoroastrian that you're so curious? So I told him that I had encounters with the Amesha Spenta, and he kicked me out of the group, and I've never talked to him since. So I was like, ooh, a little bit of a rough go there. It's like, I kind of learned my lesson there. It's like, you don't always want to talk about the Amesha Spenta. Alright, so we covered that one. Oh, one of the viewers asked me this question, so I guess let's bring up the viewer question, since we're actually going to answer it right now. So the other question that we got from a viewer, was about Dreamers Rock, Delusional, Levant. Here it is, Levant. So this one's from a viewer named Sid IK2GQ. So he said, this video is a very interesting topic for me. I've studied the ancient Levant and a lot, and I've seen that symbol so many times, like the winged disc. To be honest, he always thought this symbolized some kind of flying craft. And like the ancient people heard stories of advanced beings coming down to Earth from the sky, some kind of spaceships, and they're from their ancestors. But he actually hadn't seen them so depicted as having wings, and a way of saying that they had the ability to fly. So I put, yes, I think that's part of it as well. The winged disc story of Ezekiel wheels within wheels, or the craft that picked up the prophet Shawanasawi. I'm not sure how to say that. Sorry for any of the First Nations people. I've only read it, so I've never actually heard it spoken aloud. I'll have to do that. I've been to Manitoulin Island a few times, but haven't managed to get that far in my research there yet. So I was thinking the next slide that we'll talk about is we'll bring up some of the Zoroastrian stuff that I was able to glean off the internet. And just so has this one came up. So this idea of like the ancient people from the Zoroastrian religion being involved in like UFOs coming down and teleporting people up and down into craft, it does appear to be part of the wing disc stuff as well. Like, I'm not going to say that the wing disc is only this thing. I think the wing disc symbol is actually like a multi-layer symbol. I'm pretty sure that's a common theme in, Freemasonry as well. They talk about how some symbols have multiple meanings. Sort of how like just looking for a little bit of a drink here. Don't worry, we're not drinking alcohol, it's just some, not Minute Maid, but something I mixed in there. What is it called? Those Mio drinks or whatever. I can't consume too much sugar right now because I'm trying to lose weight or stay thinner for my surgery. But yeah, so for the viewer, we did cover that one. I do also have, some books from Zoroastrian stuff, the teachings and the Magi. So it was interesting that this is linking the Magi and the Zoroastrians as being the same people. So I know a lot of cases people hear the story about like the Magi, the three kings that visited Jesus, and they're not sure who they are and stuff. Well, some people believe that they know that it's the Zoroastrians. So I figured we'd mention that. Two more for the Zoroastrians. This one, actually, I'm not sure why is in the Zoroastrian. Oh, yes, because it's part of the Golden Bull religion. Just to give an example, that the tombs of Ur, is that Akkadian or Sumerian? Not sure. Some people can put it in the chat below. The cuneiform people. So you can kind of see that there's a connection here between like the ancient Akkadians or we'll just call everyone Sumerians for the time being, rather than try to decipher which one's which. I know it's not appropriate or exactly correct, but it's the best we got for now. So yeah, just to show the connection between the Zoroastrians' golden bulls and where apparently Zoroaster got it from was the Sumerians, which we'll discuss whether that was really the case. And oh yeah, we got the king. Oh, and the last one for the Zoroastrians. So this is when I started to, well, at this point of the slides, I'm not sure if in my journey through life I had put it together in this order, but now I'm starting to get to the part where this religion that Zoroaster brought back from the Sumerians, and this is another question atheists bring up all the time in online debates, which I love debating atheists, but they're always like, religion's like this mankind phenomenon where we've made the Bible ourselves and we just invented it all from nothing. Now this is where it comes into the Zoroaster stuff, and for the viewer that was saying this is all religious bullshit, is really all Zoroaster had to do to bring back this religion from ancient times of the Sumerians was look up. And it turns out if you look up and you see these stars, we'll make these star pattern a little bigger. This star pattern actually shows the religion of this golden bull right in the sky. So it's not like humans wrote this stuff down from nothing. They actually got it just by looking up. And now some people will definitely argue, and rightfully so, or debate, well, you could look at these stars and to determine it to be anything. They're just like stars, and people make up different patterns that happen to match, but there's no universal way of decoding stars where you could say, oh, since everyone's decoding it this way, it has to be that. Sort of like that old Bumper Stumper game show, how they would like translate bumper stickers or whatever, and the host is like, no, you translated it wrong, it's supposed to be this way. Not like there's like some universal way to translate bumper stickers or whatever, or license plates. But it just so happens, we'll cover it in more slides, or if you've seen it in the trailer, almost every religion on the entire planet, even the pagan and the other ones as well, they all happen to report these stars as the same things roughly. I'd say like 90% the same. So that's where you start to get into a really weird thing where you could almost debate atheists and win beyond any shadow of a doubt. It's like, how did all these cultures look at these same stars and all depict them as meaning the exact same thing, 90%? So the thing that they depicted it as, the golden ox, the seven sisters, or the seventh heaven, the Pleiades, and Orion, and Orion's belt, and how he holds a shield in some of them, and a lot of other ones he's holding a sacrifice. And why would he be holding a sacrifice? I think I was trying to remember where exactly I picked this part up. I think it might be from like the ancient Celtic beliefs, is that there was the stories about the heavens, like the immortals lived in the seventh heaven, like the Amesha Spenta, that's where they're hanging out. And they didn't want everyone to come into heaven. They're like, okay, heaven's like an exclusive club, sort of like that nightclub where only the cool guys are allowed in. So what they did is they made a fail-safe, like some sort of password or some way that only certain people could access it. And how they did it is they made sure that anyone that had sin couldn't enter. So that's probably why a lot of people are wondering, like the olden days, why did they care if anyone was sinning or not, right? Like they're always trying to get their sins forgiven. It's like, who cares, right? Unless you're going to jail for it or something. Like, what does it matter if you've sinned or you haven't sinned? So this is where that idea comes from. It's like, oh, you can't sin, or you have to get your sins forgiven, or you're not going to reach heaven. This is where this idea came from, as far as I can tell. As the other viewer is saying, it's all bullshit. Well, we'll cover a lot of bullshit and let the viewers decide what they think is and what isn't, right? So the other thing, I guess we won't cover the Anubis part yet because it doesn't show the rest of it, but yeah, this is where the Zoroastrian stuff and the Golden Bull religion starts to connect. And it puzzles me too, do the Zoroastrians officially admit this? Or has this like part of their Avesta text that was lost? That they don't realize that a lot of their information was coming from the stars to begin with, just by looking up. Alright, so we're already into the half-hour mark, and we've only covered maybe 2% of the show, so we'll try to speed this up a little. My wife's going to be like, dear God, you're going to keep me up all night on my first day for work. Fuck. Alright, so at least we got through the Zoroastrian part. That's pretty good. Okay, so Zoroaster, we did that. Sorry, I should have planned this a little better, but as you can tell, there's so much material to cover that planning it wasn't really that ideal of a situation. Okay, so we covered the Phoenicians, Sumerians, Zoroastrians. Oh, that's where we left off, the Zoroastrians. Okay, we covered the Albert Pike. Ah, this stage. This is actually one of my favorite stages of the research. I think it was like 10 or 20 years I got stuck where I just couldn't figure out what the winged disc was, and I started to reach the conclusion that I'm never going to figure out what the winged disc means. And lo and behold, somehow I came across the Museum of Ottawa. Didn't actually go there, but I was reading the websites for it, and I got to see this star pattern depiction. I'm like, wait a minute, isn't this the Orion star? And isn't this like how the First Nations people depict it? I was like, mind is blown. And the one thing that really caught my eye, this was the first time I had ever seen, except for the Ahura Mazda symbol, a ring around it. So that's where we're starting to see the connection, right? Where the Zoroastrian Ahura Mazda with this ring, that's explaining what the ring is. And we'll get into a little bit more detail near the end of the show, what exactly this ring symbolizes. But here's where I got into the wild stuff, where I was like, oh man, the First Nations people even show his arm, one of them reaching out to a dog star. And I think I wrote Canis Major, and I'm pretty sure I was supposed to write Canis Minor, but if anyone knows that, they want to put in the chat. But either way, the Canis star is one of the ones that it reaches out to. I was like, holy cow, we're talking about a journey here of the soul, going from heaven, from earth, and all that stuff. And isn't it wild that there's a dog that's helping guide the way? It's like, where have we heard that before? Anubis, right? So I was like, isn't that wild that the First Nations people and the Egyptians both believed that there was a dog entity that was helping guide humans and their journey through the souls, or soul's journey through the heavens. There's also a black hand that's on Orion's belt, and I don't know what this means. So I'd love it if anyone could help me translate that. I have seen it at the Royal Museum in other cultures before. I think it's even Africa. But yeah, if anyone could let me know on that, that'd be sweet. I think this one's something like the Gemini twins. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on twins. We get the ox, and we got the what is it, the Pleiadians, also known as the Seven Sisters, the rabbit or the hare. I had a wild encounter with a rabbit or hare on a holy mountain once when I was fasting, so I don't know if we'll have time to cover that story in detail, maybe when we get to that part of the show. And what's the other wild thing here? To make the show a little bit more interesting, a little bit more gruesome, sorry for anyone who's a little bit squeamish, this show is definitely PG-13, to say the least. But when it comes to this sacrificial belief, like how a lot of different cultures did sacrifice, we get into the skinwalker stuff. And I actually only heard about this maybe a couple weeks ago, so this is some of my more fresh material. It turns out like the Bigelow researchers and all that, they all have all their stuff about the skinwalkers, and to me it all sounded kind of like nonsense. But then I happened to heard another YouTuber, should have got his name ready, but if you Google or YouTube search skinwalkers, and I think it's Navajo beliefs. So I was watching his channel and he was explaining, and one of the rituals that people would use to become a skinwalker happened to be sacrifice, just like the ox thing. And that really blew my mind, because the whole skinwalker thing reminded me a lot about the light beings or the Amesha Spenta, because they can actually transform into different bodies as well. They can pretend to be a human, they can pretend to be dogs, all sorts of different things, right? So that was like mind blown for that one. Should we get too much more into that, or maybe we'll go on to the next one? Yeah, so well, we'll cover the biblical stuff in a sec, but let's give a little peek at the First Nations history while we're here. Let's go with that one. Oh, yeah, let's go with this one, actually. So some people are going to be laughing, and they're like, oh, this ring and the Orion, it looks nothing alike. So I just made a slide putting the two next to each other, Ahura Mazda. Oh, and this serpent that's on the side, if people haven't recognized that, it's actually from the Beetlejuice movie as well. We'll cover that as well. No, this whole theme for this entire show actually is part of the Beetlejuice movie. So if anyone hasn't seen it, highly recommend the movie, both the new one and the old one. Oh yeah, and that's what I should explain as well. Some of the stars that are associated above, like on the arm of Orion, that's the Betelgeuse star. So that's where you're getting the connection to Betelgeuse. And my wife was actually pointing out that the movie spells Betelgeuse a different way that doesn't match the star. But then when you happen to watch the movie, it actually spells it the correct way for the stars. And then I looked it up. I'm like, well, how come the movie title, like the poster, spells it one way, and then in the movie they spell it a different way, like when you see the name Beetlejuice in the movie? And it turned out the directors got in trouble when they were trying to advertise the movie, and they didn't like the spelling of the real Beetlejuice, so they got them to change the spelling to make the poster. But then the director's like, God's sakes, at least in the actual movie we're going to keep it the real way. And well, we'll cover more about the Beetlejuice movie later. I think I have a whole slide for that one. Okay, so that's that slide for that one. And some people might think, oh, that's still a stretch. We need more information to prove that this winged disc religion and the First Nations have any connection. So here's another one. This one here is the Ojibwe. And you can start to see this is where the mirror universe comes in, like where the Amesha Spenta live and everything's mirrored. We see that on a lot of the posters of like Sumerians, Ojibwe. We'll show every culture that does it. It's kind of mind-blowing, but so that's where I'm pretty sure like the sun and the moon. I'm not sure which is our reality, if we're the sun reality and then the immortals live in the moon reality. But anyways, there's another example of how the cultures, even separated by the oceans, almost have the identical terminology. Yeah, you can see like the pillars for the moon, they match. The sun matches. These beings that look like bears in the Ojibwe, it's the same as like those Anunnaki bird creature men or whatever. The fish, I'm not sure what that is. Turtle, I think would be for Turtle Island. Could be wrong. If people want to put it in the chat. So there's another example. How much do we really want to cover for this? Well, we'll start here. So here we have, this one's called Asia versus America. And I'm not sure if I have much material on this one, so I guess we'll cover most of it now. The one on the right that you're looking at happens to be the Asia or Japanese Royal Regalia. I think we'll hear that name again. No, it's the coat of arms we'll hear later, but yeah, this is the Regalia. And if you haven't seen it, there's a reason why. The story goes that this Regalia was actually brought to humanity down from the stars, from the immortals themselves. And these 3 items happen to actually be still held in a museum, but no one's allowed to look at it except for like the leaders of Japan. So it's like completely forbidden. Even finding the website that had the image of the scroll, that was a bitch to find too. Like it wasn't in any of the Google searches, and then I happened to I can't remember how I got the link for the website, but I was like, wow, I actually found a website that never shows up in Google. No matter how many times you search it in different terms, it just never comes up. So how I ever found it, I can't remember. Oh, and the top of the sword handle is actually in the same shape as, what is it called? Omega. And if anyone saw the other slide or presentation, Omega comes up a lot in this research. And then they got these 4 orbs on the side. What is it, 8 of them? And then I was kind of wondering, like, that's weird. Like, what are those? Like, the other things are a sword, a mirror, and a jewel. We'll talk maybe about it in more detail. The 3 virtues. Well, I guess, yeah, since we're here and we're talking about the 3 virtues, we'll bring up the last viewer comment. Now, this one's actually my favorite comment because I've actually met this guy in person at a convention in Toronto. If anyone's ever heard of Fan Expo, I was lucky enough to be presenting this Wild Wing disc stuff, and a guy named, well, we'll call him Persian Pirate Jesus because that's his name on YouTube. And we happened to meet, and he's like, wow, it's neat to see the Ahura Mazda stuff. So he gave me a whole bunch of wild information, like stuff that I wouldn't even repeat on YouTube, But yeah, so his comment is, the ring around the body also symbolizes the concept of one's thoughts, words, and actions. And coming back to oneself, aka karma, literally whatever goes around comes around. And that's wild. So I put, what is it? Oh yeah, it's also common in like Roman Catholic stuff in my church. They would say there was also 3 things you're supposed to do before you do the gospel. You would do the sign of the cross on your forehead, your lips, or then your heart, symbolizing all the different meanings behind that. And it just goes to show that it turns out for the regalia, each one of them has a different virtue as well. I think it's benevolence. I forget the other ones. Maybe bravery or something like that. If anyone knows the 3 regalia, they can put it in the chat below too. Help me out there, please, everyone. Or I'll do it after if no one else does. Yeah, so there's 3 terms for that one as well. It reminds me of the 3 stars of Orion, right? That's symbology of 3 comes up a lot. It was actually Richard Casaro. He was a Freemason and friend of mine from a few years ago. And he used to talk a lot about the 3 symbology in Freemasonry too. I think he mentioned it as doorways for the Freemasons, but I could be wrong in that. I haven't talked to Richard in quite a few years. So that's the Asia, and what would this be, Aztec or Mayan? I always get those mixed up, or all the different cultures in South America, so sorry for my terminology on that. Oh, and remember how I was talking about how the light beings or the Amesha Spenta gave me a coin? We'll cover the coin image first, I guess. So this was the coin that they gave me. The light beings, they didn't just hand me the coin. How it worked is they threw it on the ground where we were standing, And when we got to see a little bit of time travel stuff that they can do, like to control our universe like the Matrix, they did that for me. And basically what it was is we were standing in one spot and it was like midnight, and then in a second later, like even like just moving your body, like in the time I could go like this, it went from midnight to like 10 a.m. or like 11 a.m. Not even like morning, like 6 a.m. It was like almost the afternoon. So we went running inside. We were terrified. We're like, oh my God, whatever we just saw showed us the craziest stuff you could ever imagine. And we ran inside. But when we came back, we were like looking on the ground. We're like, is there any evidence to what we saw last night? We looked on the ground, and then that's where this coin was, right where we were standing. And in Canada, back in the early 80s, people know there wasn't a whole lot of Mexican currency around. Like I've never seen a Mexican currency my whole life before I'd actually picked up this coin. And it's actually almost identical to the size of a quarter, like a 25 cents in Canada. And this was the one symbol on it, and I couldn't figure it out for my whole life. I was even asking some of my friends from like Argentina and stuff. I'm like, hey guys, do you know what this symbol means? And I can't remember. I think they helped me with the Montezuma part, but they weren't sure about the cactus. And it turns out that the cactus symbol here is another one of those sacred trees we were looking at, like the Anunnaki ones. And according to legend, the god of war told the people where to settle when they saw an eagle perched on a cactus holding a snake in its beak. And it almost has like the winged disc above it to boot. So that's where we're starting to get really wild, how so many of these different cultures are connected. And it's kind of really weird too that I just happened to be getting this coin that was going to talk about this. And it was actually Billy Carson. I know there's a lot of debates with Billy Carson going on now about his material and all this, but Billy's helped me out a ton. We even did a show together when I just started podcasting. I think he was my first or second guest. So yeah, he actually showed me a slide that proves that what the cactus is sitting on, or the bird is sitting on a cactus, and the cactus happens to be growing out of a symbol for sacrifice. So we'll get into a little bit more how sacrifice and this snake legend for where Enoch was built, or Mexico City, was also called Tenochtitlan. And once we get into the up north material, we'll discover that what Tenochtitlan could be related to this. And that's me up on top of a holy mountain and trying to duplicate some of the ancient rituals minus the sacrifice stuff. I'm not into sacrifices, well, other than fasting, but no animal sacrifice, because I'm a follower of Jesus, and I always believe that he was actually here to stop the sacrifices, that we no longer needed to do these ox sacrifices or worship the golden ox or do the fire temple, because he was here to replace that. But I'm still doing the pouring the holy water and stuff from the Anunnaki bags. I've got a whole bunch of material on that, but we don't want the show to be like 10 hours, so we'll have to do that another episode. I know, who is it, one of the actors from the Viking show, he loves it when I talk about that stuff. I'm trying to remember his name. I'll give him a shout out later in the chat if I can't remember it. But he also did a podcast with me, so big shout out to the Viking show. Not to do all this name dropping of Billy Carson and Vikings, but wait till we get to some of the other name dropping. Alright, so here we just break down to the Ojibwe sacred tree. We got the offering table, Turtle Island. Oh yeah, Turtle Island would be the rock. The offering table's the water, the body, brought to earth by the Great Spirit, the Ojibwe sacred tree. I can't even remember making this slide, so if I got any of the information wrong, people can put it below. Made it so long ago I can't even remember making it. But then again, if I made it yesterday, I wouldn't remember either, sadly. Okay, so there's a comparison of those two. What other ones that we got are cool for the First Nations? We covered that one. Oh, here's the cactus in more detail. Oh, you can even see that the bird, like of the winged disc, is holding the serpent in its talon, just like the Ahura Mazda one. How that serpent rope descends down. Oh, the Zoroastrians also say another 3 virtues from that, or the feathers. The 3 layers of feathers are good thoughts, good words, good deeds. And then the opposite of the feathers is like the opposite of those virtues. Oh, and then hope he doesn't mind. This is actually a picture from my wedding, and some of the First Nations people that I talked to about this, I told them about the light beings, which I was like, oh God, here's another mistake. I'm telling people about the Amesha Spenta. And the old, like the chief that I did a ceremony with, the Beaver House people, he wasn't too keen on it, just like the Zoroastrian priests. Pretty much got like shunned after, but not to say, like, not completely shunned, but not really welcomed much either. But the other Beaver House people, like an elder named Abraham, he's like one of the oldest people I gather from the Beaver House people where I live up north now, where I'm researching this stuff where I live. It's pretty wild. He actually came and was like our guest of honor at our wedding. So I just thought I'd share that slide. Give a little bit more history about, yeah, I'm not just getting all this First Nation stuff from textbooks and stuff. I am hearing some of the oral tradition stuff from the people themselves. Not to brag or anything, but just to make that clear. Not to brag. If you're bragging about this stuff, you'd be a pretty weird person, right? Not that I couldn't get any more weird. Right, so anyways, the biblical story of Cain and Abel is another example where we get into like this really old sacrifice tradition and how Cain tried the fruit, but it didn't work. So Abel tried offering a shepherd, like the ox, just like is shown in the stars, and that's what worked, lo and behold, just like the stars say, right? And then it talks too about how Cain, when he did that, he ended up killing his brother because he was so jealous. Me and my brothers fight all the time, but I don't think I'd actually get to the point of killing them, but I know I wouldn't, but yeah, just to get into the idea of that. What else was I going to cover? Oh yeah, and the other sacrifice traditions, if people haven't heard of it before, when the Navajo talk about how they turned into a skinwalker, the most dangerous part of the whole ritual is that you ended up having to sacrifice someone you were very close to in order to become a skinwalker. Not to teach people how to do it. I don't actually believe that stuff works. And definitely don't do it because I said, or because I talked about it. But anyways, yeah. But this biblical tradition of like killing someone that's very close to you is like Cain and Abel. He killed his own brother. What's the other prophet or like biblical figure who had to take his son and took him up onto the top of the mountain, and the creator was going to ask him to sacrifice his son? So there you get another example of how the sacrifice that Jesus thankfully came to replace, so we don't have to do any of it anymore. But it was often that kind of tradition. So some really wild and scary stuff. Oh, that's what we should talk about too, before we skip the First Nation stuff. This one's one of the hardest ones for me to talk about. It's a terrible sacrifice that actually took place, I'm not sure exactly, at the same offering table that I'm pouring water into. I hope not. But it was on top of this mountain. They actually found a dismembered body back in like the 70s, and he was dismembered in a ritual fashion, and they never actually determined who it was that was murdered. And I talked to some people, I won't do any name drops for this one, but one of the people that I met at my wedding, and he was like, he wants to figure out how the guy got the body up there. It's like, was it a helicopter or what was it? And I was like, well, chances are, I didn't want to even talk to him about it because it's so weird, but it's like probably the old tradition from the skinwalkers or from the Bible. It was probably someone that he was very close to. So if you could solve who the body was, you would probably figure out who murdered them. Like it was probably one of his own relatives, if I had to guess. And I hope I'm way off on that one. Alright, so we covered the brutal sacrifice stuff and other stuff. Dear God, sorry when I talk about the sacrifice stuff, it gets really brutal. It like freaks me out. I don't know if anyone's ever had demonic dreams before. The Navajo talk about it. I actually had a demonic dream when I just learned about the Navajo stuff. And yeah, the Navajo teacher was teaching how that when you have a demonic dream, one of the ways you can tell it from like just a normal nightmare is like a feeling of dread. And I've had that feeling of dread when I do the research on sacrifice. Like it's a terrible feeling, like almost all the hair on your body just stands on edge. And yeah, that feeling of dread and the dreams. Yeah, I forget where I was going with that one, but I'll try to finish that train of thought when I remember. Oh yeah, and then the other way you can tell is when I woke up, they even talk about if any animals are freaking out. So the last time I had this dream about the demonic entity, turned out when I woke up, I'm like, oh God, that felt just like a demon dream. Thank God I don't hear animals screaming. And just as I had that thought, my neighbor's cat just freaks, like starts hissing at the top of its lungs, like screeching like it's fighting, but it's not fighting another cat or an animal, it's just by itself. One creature just freaking out. Just like the Navajo story, or history, or active still to this day. No, it's some really dark stuff, so sorry I had to cover that, but we'll try to keep it less dark as much as I can. Alright, so we covered that, and I guess now we'll have to bring up the biblical stuff, because we got the Cain and Abel stuff open. Uh-oh, opened the wrong slide. Okay, so the Cain and Abel stuff, covered that. Oh, there it is. There we go. Alright, so we got that, and oh, long, that's what I needed. Alright, so the religious stuff. I'm just going to grab my drink here quick too. So we talked about the Magi a little bit, and I guess we'll just go in order from how I have it in the folder. It's probably not going to be the greatest order, but there we go. So here's an example of part of my family history is Ukrainian. So this is either a Polish, Ukrainian, or some sort of Slavic Easter egg. And it's neat how they put in the sacred symbology of like the mirror tree and stuff as well. It's actually the Slavic religion that still uses the Anunnaki pail and the pine cone. They call it the asperum or something like that, if anyone knows how to pronounce it. I guess you won't be able to tell us the pronunciation, but maybe you could just type it out so we could look it up on Wikipedia. So we got that one. Here's the three magi when we showed the book, how it could be connected to the Zoroastrians, or basically any of the ancient pagans that followed the stars. The transfiguration of Jesus. This is where it starts to get a little bit wild. Like when Jesus was up on a mountain, like the holy mountain that I was, he managed to transform himself into a light being. And one of the only ways you're supposed to be able to do that is the ritual for the skinwalker stuff. But there's two versions of that ritual. There's one that's the shortcut method, which involves sacrificing like someone that you care about, which is terrible. And then the one that Jesus, I hope, did. And there's like a longer version, harder way to do it. And I think that's the way that he did it. Let's hope. Yeah, and this transformation ritual shows the perfect life of heaven, or living in the seventh heaven, or where the immortals live in the Pleiadian stars. It was funny when the Koreans came over to visit us up north. One of them asked me where heaven was, and I'm like, well, it's the seven sisters, the Pleiadian stars, the seventh heaven. And the Korean woman looks at me like, oh my God, and then she gives me this really cool gift. So I was like, wow, that was nice. Not a kiss or anything, like an actual physical object, just in case my wife is watching. Well, she was there, so she would know. Yeah, and then that mountain actually matches. Jesus did his transfiguration on a holy mountain. I think it's called Mount Tabor. People debate where or whatever. But this mountain's almost an identical copy of the First Nations one that I'm actually living close to and researching pretty much full time right now. Other than my regular life stuff like surgeries. Yeah, so the curse of Cain. We talked about Tenochtitlan and the First Nation stuff. This is where it gets connected. Like after Cain was banished from wherever they came from again. What was that? People want to put it in the chat. Oh, the Garden of Eden or Garden of Eve, one of those. So Cain, after he did this horrible sacrifice, God had one punishment for him, that he was no longer able to grow food. But he still wanted Cain to be able to survive and procreate. So he gave him one special ability to help him, and he was able to build giant cities out of stone. And if anyone's heard the mysteries that we got all over the world, how are these giant stone pyramids and stuff built? That's the curse of Cain. So the people that were doing like building pyramids, that's the same technology that Cain got from God. And he also wandered after, like, I believe he was up north where we are, the First Nations mountain Kemenis, where that human sacrifice took place, sadly. Is he wandered away because where we live up north, it's a hell hole. Like, if you've ever seen one, it's beautiful in the summertime, but we get like 10 months of winter here and it's unrelenting. Like, no melt period. It's just always winter for 10 months. Then you get 2 months of nice weather and then back to the hell of winter. So I'm pretty sure Cain, he got sick of mining all the gold here. He's like, forget this gold mining. Let's go down south and get the hell away from this cold and bugs and everything else that's in the land of Nod. I'm basically living in the land of Nod as far as I'm concerned. So anyways, he wandered all the way down south and he built the city called Enoch. And the city there is like we covered in the Mexican coat of arms. It's called Tenochtitlan, or Mexico City. So there we have Jesus and the Easter egg, and we talked a little bit about the sacrifice on the mountain. And this little picture of the moon up here, that's like a hare, and he's doing a sacrifice as well. And it's part of the Aztec ritual, and it's also part of Chinese, the lunar rover, what was it called, the Jade Rabbit. So I didn't get that slide ready, but that's a little bit of information if anyone's wondering. Another example of where did this religion come from. Didn't come from like some guy channeling it. Didn't come from some guy getting drunk and then writing stuff down. It came from actually looking up. I don't know if that's better or not, but that's where he got it. Yeah, so we talked about how Tubal Cain, apparently that's involved in Freemasonry, I wouldn't know. And Cain and Enoch, when he got the city, he left and he went over back to the Holy Land. Some people believe, just like the movie Noah, that he snuck himself back onto the ark. And that's how we got all these different pyramids and stuff built, is the curse of Cain did not die off with the flood. He managed to get back to the Holy Land, and he started building more giant cities of stone. And not to take credit from other cultures who believe that they've created stone as well, I wouldn't be surprised if this curse of Cain could be also adapted without being cursed. Like someone could learn the stonework without the curse. Let's hope. Alright, so we did a little bit of research on how the Noah's Ark and where all the gold was happens to match Mount Kemenis. Also a place in Bulgaria. They have an offering table that matches it nearly identical. I actually bought the commercial rights to use this picture of Bulgaria, so big shout out to the guy who took that picture. It's sweet. You can see how some of the roads match, the offering table matches, where the city matches, roughly the same size of offering table. And lo and behold, in both Canada and the Bulgaria one, there's a Stonehenge just off to the side of it as well. So that's where I started to realize that, hey, there's a big connection here to the Holy Land and this place of Nod. So I just drew a little bit of a map, how you could ship the gold from Nod all the way down the Ottawa River and back to the Holy Land. One of the places that they used as a rest stop to stockpile the gold also happens to be Magog. And Magog, if you haven't heard of it before, it's like the red-haired people that were cannibals. So I won't get into the cannibal stuff because we've already gotten this show so gross already, but it could get a lot worse. Maybe we'll save that for another episode. People like and share and stuff. But anyways, yeah, so that's also the Freemasons' biggest headquarters for outdoor lodges. They got a giant owl sculpture up there. That's the original Bohemian Grove owl. So not the fake one that Alex Jones was researching, but the real one. It's actually on the top here where they were moving the gold back. And we can see that the locations are actually all match the names of Noah's grandsons. People like to make fun of Noah and they're like, oh, it wasn't real. But you also have to explain why all these different port cities all over the world, the oldest ones, are all named after Noah's grandkids, even the First Nations ones. But they have a slightly different pronunciation. I think it's Magog, so they added some other stuff to it. And we got the offering tables, and we also show how Anubis, remember we talked about it before, Anubis, he's connected to the offering tables, like we seen he's guiding the souls to the afterlife. Here we're depicting King Solomon's temple and showing how it's very similar. The layout, how the pillars of 8 match the 8 orbs on the side of the regalia and the Sumerian, the Omega symbol, the end of the journey of the soul. And we'll get into the Egyptian one in a bit. This is one of my, I don't even think I brought the full slide for that one, but well, we'll cover that one a full episode. Right, so that's it for the religious ones. In case anyone's not into religion, that's most of the religious stuff. The only other debate here, it's kind of another gross one. Some people are really going to hate it, but it's part of the theory, so we got to check it out a little bit. Is the story, remember how the immortals, they don't actually want people to reach heaven? So it turns out the stories in the 3 magi, or magi in general, they're not usually the good guys. So the magi, like especially in Persian history, they're usually the scammers, not to make fun of it, but gypsies. And they always have like some sort of lies or half-truths, and they're like causing empires to collapse and always like wreaking havoc wherever they go. So there is the one theory that the magi actually came and tricked Jesus, but hopefully they taught him, right? And not just tricked him. If they tricked him, boy, there opens up like a whole nother can of worms, right? Alright, so where did we leave off? The religious stuff. Now you can see why I didn't want to do a 3-minute episode for this, all this stuff, because yeah, you can never cover this all in 3 minutes, right? We're already over an hour. And I think we're about halfway, so we're doing pretty good. Alright, so just to symbolize a lot of these offering tables, they have the ox and the bird wings. So now we know why, because of that Orion man's stance, and the Taurus or the bull symbol for you have to reach heaven, you need an ox sacrifice. It was believed that a horned beast was actually the perfect equivalence for a human sacrifice. So if you wanted to do, say, the skinwalker ritual, this is probably the good way, where you don't actually have to sacrifice a loved one, but it can be an ox or another horned beast, like maybe a deer or something, whatever you have. And for the vegans, yeah, I definitely don't recommend the animal sacrifices either, unless you're planning to eat it legally. So yeah, we talked about alpha and omega. That's the terminology for the arms outstretched, going from alpha to omega. Alpha being the Hebrew word aleph, meaning the same thing, like horned beast or ox. And omega, I don't really have a lot of translations for what the omega part of it is. So if anyone has more theories about omega, we'd love to read those in the chat below. And they're also saying here that it's like one of the oldest versions is from Christians, but you can tell that it's not really the oldest, because just like Zoroaster, you could just point up. So that's where the oldest would be, I think. Nothing's really going to be older than the stars of the universe themselves. So I disagree with a little bit. And this whole alpha to omega stuff is actually very popular in the book of Revelation. So I figured I'd just mention that. Also, the verse is 2:16, and that's a lot of research people put about the 2:16 being the God number. So just figured I'd mention that quickly. Alright, so yeah, this alpha to omega, or the winged disc symbology, is very popular. Even you find this symbol in almost every church. This is where it gets wild too. This whole symbology is actually the origins of our alphabet. Like how each one of these symbols is actually, for this ritual, is part of our alphabet, or at least the first and last letters. There it shows like the alph, or the ox. Now I explain it here too, just a little bit why some people have just depicted it as a bird or an ox. Turns out the Phoenicians, they were really into this ritual too. They're even shown holding the rings. The different plants that were involved in reaching it. We talked about the shamanic elements to it. And the craft that he's sitting on shows that him journeying. And comparing it to the Egyptian one. This is actually from a National Geographic book I have. That's why the scan is so high res. I actually got it scanned right out of the book itself. So big shout out to National Geographic for that one. This is King Tut's chair. Oh yeah, and if you haven't seen the symbol of, or watched Ancient Aliens, they talk about King, what's the Lord Pakal from South America? His tomb, like the Lord Pakal's tomb lid, where they show him like sitting with his knee bent. It's actually the identical copy, or not identical, but 99% the same as the Egyptian version. So there's another case where we get the Egyptian and the South American cultures being linked so closely. Even without contact, I think they could do it too, just by looking up, right? That's where you get the ox or symbology, the bird, the seventh heaven, the winged disc with the serpents that come off. I know a lot of people call it the sun, but I don't think at this point we really call it the sun. And it turns out that the Phoenicians would draw the Aleph symbol sideways, almost like a bird's beak. So that's how you see the connection between the Phoenician translation and the Egyptian translation, how they match each other, and how eventually we just took the Phoenician A and turned it so it was standing upright, sort of like the arch in a human body, like the, what is it, the standing man in England? I forget his name, so someone could put it there too. So that's a little bit by, like I think in Göbekli Tepe, I know there's some researchers that believe it has nothing to do with this, which they could easily be right. But that's where I think why the bird is on those ones so much, because it's going with the Egyptian way of doing it. Right, so we talked a lot about the Zoroastrians, and what we should talk about is how Vedic stuff is like the opposite of Zoroaster. So in Zoroaster, one deity is a god, and the Vedic stuff, he's a demon. So this sort of terminology, you can see like the winged disc creatures, the four wings that they have on them, it's to depict the movement inside of that red ring. And they're also called demons in this. So it's like, I know in Christian stuff we always associate the winged creatures as angels, but this is like the opposite way of thinking about it, where they consider them demons. But just like the skinwalker, I bet you there's demonic ways of doing it and angelic ways of doing the same ritual, right? And I definitely don't recommend either. Jesus is still the way, I think. Alright, so we got the Freemason stuff again. We got the three at the top, which we would say is the Orion stars, the horns. If you ever seen why demons have horns, it's because it's symbolizing the horns from the ritual, how they became a skinwalker as they sacrificed a horned beast to get this special abilities. And the snakes that come down from it, just like their Ahura Mazda symbol there. We cover a little bit of the Bulgarian stuff. If anyone's wondering why I keep talking about the Bulgarian stuff, it's pretty much where a lot of my research, well, maybe through the middle part of it now. I used to research Bulgaria quite a bit. And this symbol comes from a cave, and the cave is, one of the oldest caves, like arguably, debatably, one of the oldest cave arts in the world. And it happens to be next to a town that's called Sumer in Bulgaria. And the town is so old, no one even knows who named it Sumer. Maybe the Sumerians, who knows. Yeah. So we show how that connects. We show how the three pyramids of South America and Egypt both match the Orion's belt. And there's a lot of debate with that. And big shout out to, what was the guy who came up with Robert Bouval, that's it, for the Egyptian one. Memory's not always gone. Sometimes like some things stick. The Aztec symbol, or Mayan, I'm not sure which one. This symbology is where it gets into dark, how some of the cultures in South America, they didn't bother with the horned beast sacrifice, and they were just using human sacrifice, so it's pretty terrible. And then shout out to Louisa. She was when I was teaching a class about this in London, Ontario, she came up with a great question. It's like, why are these people doing all this sacrifices? At the time, I didn't know about the skinwalker stuff, so now I think if I had to re-answer her question, I would say it was to do more with the skinwalker ritual, or the way that the cheating way or the evil way to reach immortality or heaven. But I get the feeling if you did this kind of stuff, like the sacrifice, and then you got to heaven, they would probably still have another way just to boot you out. Hopefully you don't still get in doing it that way. So we got Ergodic, that's really long time ago, so maybe that's like Sumerian, or no, there's the Sumerian one. We're just showing how it connects to the name ox. And even the Slavic symbol for A is really like ox horns upside down, right? I could be wrong about that. I am part Slavic, but I don't know the language. Well, I know counting to 1 to 10, and that's about it. What was it? Uno, Dvi, tree, cheddary, pet, chess, sedum, autumn, debit, decet, something like that. Got pretty close, I think. I haven't tried in like 10 years, so, or almost 10 years, so I think I did pretty good in remembering that. So yeah, when you get to the 4 wings, or the multiple spinning inside of the ring, it also matches, who is this one again? Venishu. So a lot of the stuff from the Vedic. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm always going to get Vedic and the other one mixed up, the Zoroastrian one, so I'll try not to. Excuse me, this one's actually the oracle from, I think, China, and it means deity as far as I know. So it's interesting, got that same symbology for deity even in Asia. Oh, and this is where we got into one of the viewer questions when they were talking about the, what was it, the winged disc and how it's actually a craft. This reminds me of the when I was at the museum in Toronto, ROM. They had it set up as a lot of exhibits showing the winged disc as actually being a portal. So some of the pictures showed like gods coming through the winged disc, putting a ladder down so that they could climb down through the portal, go on Earth for a while, then climb back up and go in the portal and be gone. So it's some really wild technology. It almost seems like it's a mixture of archaic technology and like super advanced technology, as weird as that sounds. Like it couldn't get any weirder. No, and if anyone's wondering why Ahura Mazda, or the deity inside the winged disc in this one, is carrying the bow, I think it was the, what is it, the Akkadians, or it could be another one, but they were talking about how the bow symbolizes the rainbow, so the creator switched from carrying the ring to the bow to show that he would never flood mankind again. I tried to get that out in the 30-second little commercial, or 3-minute, and I kept screwing it up every time. But at least I think I got it reasonable that time. Alright, so here we got the, if anyone's heard of Karatepe, it's actually some ruins like just down the street, or I'm not sure exactly how far, but pretty close in Turkey to where Göbekli Tepe is. And everyone's trying to solve Göbekli Tepe, and I was thinking, well, it's pretty obvious to me and anyone who's been looking at these ruins just down the street, is they had the winged disc symbology. So this idea that Göbekli Tepe is involved in this pagan ox worshipping, like immortal journey to heaven type religion, it's just down the street at Karatepe. And I found these ruins on Google Earth and was able to take a picture and then try to translate them from what remains. So for me, I've looked at this symbology so many times, like millions and millions of times, that when I saw this, I was like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. That's like the mirror image around the winged disc and the sacred tree. Bottom would be sacrifice. Could be a sword in the middle, just like from Japan. Usually a stone at the bottom. Well, I guess we should cover that now. Alright, so we'll go into that next. Yep, the tree slide, there it is. So we'll come back to this one in a sec. So here's just examples of the sacred tree. I tried to find one in Egypt, like the Egyptian stuff, and that's the closest sacred tree I could find. I think I took that picture at the ROM, but I could be wrong. And then we get more into the America one, like South America, Europe, or Samaria, whatever you want to call it. And then Asia, or like Japan, the regalia. And this is where we get into the Hindu one. Yeah, I think I called it Vedic. Then it shows like sacrifices involved, the pillar in the center, the stone at the bottom, the serpents at the top, the feathers from like the bird, and how you're achieving enlightenment, the multiple heads. or reaching immortality to go to heaven. It's got the moon and the sun symbology. Some of the even symbols, they're matched the same that are near it. Like I forget which symbol it is, but one of these ones here and one of these ones here are almost identical. So I was like, wow, that's kind of weird too, right? Just sort of tie all these cultures and together into the old. Like people always ask, like, what is the old pagan religion? Is it the same one? To me, I would say yes, because you could just look up to the stars, get all the information to do this. You don't even have to travel to the other continents to get it. This is one of the really old Sumerian ones, I think. Shira, a goddess, and she's like doing the same symbology, holding that flower, that the shamanic plant, or the serpents that come down. Yeah, here we show more about the Asian connections. And yeah, you can see the omega symbol and the omega symbol. The symbol in the center, it's actually a mirror in Japan. So I'm assuming this one could be a mirror and a sword and a stone. Just like we have the stone at the bottom. You can even see it's almost the same shape. Yeah, here's more of the comparisons. How the Bulgarian sacred tree had the yi, or the E symbol, the cave art, the cervicane. Can't even remember that, but the rings and the omega symbols, the offering tables, the Stonehenges. Some people, I know it's debatable, they call Bulgaria the land of the Aryans, which is kind of ironic because the native or the people living in Bulgaria now, most of them don't look very Aryan, like the idea of blonde hair and blue eyes. But then when you look into the ancient history of Bulgaria, they've had a bit of colonization going on, displacement, and people changing. So not to make fun of the current Bulgarian people and calling them not the natives, but there is that theory. And they actually debate that theory at a conference in Varna every year, I believe, the academics. There's a whole bunch of evidence both ways, so who knows, right? The Celtic sacred tree, we talked about, I don't think we did actually, the Tuda Donanen, who is it, Robert Seffert. He does a lot of the information about this. Sorry I'm saying all the names wrong. I've actually heard that name pronounced to me a lot in person, and I still say it wrong every time. Sorry. And yeah, they got the sacred tree, the spear stone, the cauldron. The cauldron is where you get into the witchcraft part of it, like the offering table is actually a cauldron. Yeah, some from France, Assyria. Oh, Assyria, that's the name. I don't know what I kept saying before, Akkadian. So I think I was meaning to say Assyrian, but we'll just call it Sumerian, so people can correct each one in the chat if they want. I always get them mixed up. Talks about they were brought to Earth by the legendary ancestor of the Japanese imperial line. Here's the one, the breakdown of the Hindu one, or from India. Here's the one for the pagan. If anyone's seen the Gunterstock cauldron, that one, you can see it also has the same symbology, holding the serpent, the ring, and the horns. Remember, the horns are because they did the ox ritual to become immortals. And it seems like this guy is kind of like proving that the ox sacrifice is the kinder way or the better way to do it, because it's harder to do, but it looks like all the animals love him, right? And if he was like a murdering prick, then he probably wouldn't have all the animals loving him. If he was like sacrificing his family. You fucker. Alright, we'll try not to swear too much anymore, but we are talking about sacrifice, so it should be okay, I hope. Alright, so the sacred tree of life, they talk about the medicine wheel, the First Nations people a lot. And this is where I think when they talk about like all the different colors of humanity working together to figure out the same religion. I know I'm starting to sound like a cult leader at this point, but it's hard not to when you're trying to share this information. I don't have a cult for anyone to sign up to if they're wanting to ask. Not yet. No, I'm just kidding. I'm already married, so no sex cults for me. Who knows? Hopefully someone doesn't take this research and start a cult, but for God's sakes, you prick, you better not. Just kidding. Yeah, we got the breakdowns of the different cultures and how they're all very similar. to this global pagan religion of the fire temples. Oh yeah, the Beaver House people, the guys that attend the fires here, they have the same like rules for fire temple keeping as the ancient Persians. So it was kind of neat to me that I started to notice a lot of First Nations words and Persian words are actually very similar. Like what is it, Manu and Manitou? They both mean spirit. So I know it's not identical, but damn close enough for me to at least talk about it on this show. Yeah, again, then we'll get into Crazy Horse's prediction. He sees a time when all 7 generations, like the seventh heaven, will colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole world will become one circle again. I know we're sounding like a cult. Better not start a cult if anyone's thinking of that. Well, let me start it. No, I'm just kidding. No cult here. Not yet. Just kidding. No, I definitely not into cults. Unless it's a cult of video games, and I'd love it. But anyways, so this was actually the picture I think that Billy Carson shared with me, and it was similar to one that AJ or JJ Ainsworth was working on, and it was just neat to me how it shows the Mexican coat of arms and then links it to sacrifice. You can see this is one of the sacrifices on the pyramids where they have the tree coming out of the guy's stomach or something. Oh, it's brutal, just like the Vedic one, right? God, I don't want to talk much more about sacrifice, so I'll try to keep that. We'll finish that soon. I know the dates and all the names for this is wild. This was early on in my research, but I decided to include it anyways, even though it's not very accurate for the names and dates, sorry. But figured I'd share it just for a little peek of how my research was progressing or digressing, if you ask the critics. Oh yeah, and then I think I found this one since the picture is so blurry. I bet you this one's from the ROM Museum. It almost looks like it's got a picture of like the seven dots, like the seventh heaven, and showing that you can change into a light body or the skinwalker ritual, and it's associating it with the winged disc. And I think the fish, yeah, someone was pointing out that's probably Pisces since everything connects to the stars. The different sacred trees like the Norse, the Assyrian, or the Hebrews. Sorry for all the images. I know a lot of these are probably copyrighted, and if anyone wants me to take them down, just let me know. You bastards. Just kidding. Yeah, here's the Japanese one. We covered that in pretty good detail already. Alright, so yeah, thank God we made it through the whole sacred tree thing. I thought that was going to take forever, so we rifled through that pretty quick. Alright, just to summarize, we've covered the Zoroastrians, the trees. Shit, did we do the sacrifice stuff yet? Do I dare do that yet? Oh my God. I don't want to do that stuff. No, it's like usually when I do the shows about the sacrifice stuff, that's when I start getting the horrible skinwalker dreams. Oh God, they're horrible. If anyone's ever had one, it's like the worst nightmare you could ever have. I guess, yeah, we'll try to get it out of the way then, right? Oh, thank God, there's only a few slides for it. Right, this is like showing the sacrifice, but the good version, where hopefully it's like, yeah, if you do the animal sacrifice, the animals even love you. I guess you have to give thanks, and then the animals won't be pissed that you're sacrificing them instead of a human. But then there's always the Jesus sacrifice, where hopefully that's not the case, and we can just go by Jesus now. And then, yeah, you have the torque around the neck. I always wondered the torque around the neck and the ring that Ahura Mazda is holding in the winged disc. It seemed like an interesting connection to me. Oh man, that was the worst sacrifice episode ever. I did a whole show about this one, and it's like one of my most popular view-wise, and I felt disgusting making it, but it was so much information about it that I almost couldn't not do it, because I'm like, oh my God, people should really know like what happens with the sacrifice stuff. Like, you know, in the ancient times how they would take the most beautiful woman from the village and get her to be sacrificed. Turns out that Miss USA was also sacrificed, but maybe not. They're saying that could be just like a ritual, or not a ritual, a normal suicide, as normal as that can get. And I know how awkward of a topic it is, because I've had a lot of friends and family, sadly, who ended their lives with suicide. So it hits home really bad. That's not just because I'm trying to downplay talking about this, but Yeah, it's a freaking brutal topic. But when Miss USA died, sadly I can't remember her name. I think it's Christy. Someone could put it in the chat below. I feel terrible now that I can't even remember her name. But I can't remember anything. I even forget my own name sometimes. But yeah, she died at the age of 30, and she jumped from the Orion Tower in New York. And guess where the Orion Tower in New York is? We'll cover it. It's a ley line of sacrifice. I know we haven't got to the ley line stuff yet, so I'll probably jump from this to that next. It's terrible. Oh, and then she wrote a whole suicide note that talked about sacrifice. I was like, oh my god, it's a fucking nightmare. No, I'm praying for all the family and everyone who's lost anyone to suicide. It's a fucking nightmare. If you're thinking about suicide, make sure you get help. For God's sakes, talk to a counselor or someone before it gets that bad, right? I know I've had dark thoughts like that too, and I made sure to go right to a fucking counselor first thing, and even go to the hospital if that's the only chance you got to save yourself. At least protect your family from the grief, right? Right, so we talked about the Beetlejuice star a bit. And oh yeah, this one's Santeria. I have had a guest on the show twice about Santeria, and each time I was hoping we could talk about sacrifice, but he doesn't like to talk about sacrifice, and I don't blame him. It's a fucking brutal thing to talk about. But Santeria is one of the only religions that still follows Jesus that still does the sacrifice stuff. So that's a little bit gross to talk about, but this is one of the pictures I took at the Raw Museum, and it blew my mind that it matches the Aztec almost identically, right? Like, dear God. It's kind of weird that a lot of people don't notice these connections, or I guess they do, and they just have more common sense not to talk about it. Dear God, what am I doing? So anyways, Turtle Island, like that guy said, this is all bullshit. It's like, oh, I fucking hope it is. God damn, I hope you're right, man. Alright, so there was a guy named Jacob who does videos on YouTube, a First Nations guy. Look him up if you want to hear this whole story. But he talked about it, and that's how I found out about it. And it's got like the Turtle Island, and how Turtle Island wasn't the only part of sacrifice in the creation of the earth. That turns out the rest of the planet was a giant elephant, and the head was ordered to be cut off by the creator, and the First Nations people tied it to the tail of Turtle Island. So that's how that continent drifted over to South America. And when you match it all up, it turns out, I don't think we have the slide for it. I should have, because, well, maybe when we get to the ley line stuff. But the ley lines and the elephant match in a way that'll blow your mind. Some of my viewers, like, you got to make a short for that, and I can't remember if I did, but hopefully I will soon. Oh yeah, and then Jacob talks about how the turtle, when it leans from one side to the other, is why the mountains are higher on the west coast and ground down on the east side. Wasn't just the Ice Age. A little bit of both, I bet. Oh, and and the elephant's neck, where it's bleeding, happens to be the Mediterranean. And the elephant's tears, where they drain down, happens to be the Amazon River. Isn't that a weird coincidence? You know what's the most disgusting coincidence about this altogether? Well, other than the fact that the elephant's groin area, like on the map where the groin is, happens to be the most densely populated humans ever. So it's like that's where the most humans are, is right at the reproductive organ. And the worst part, especially for Japan, where the elephant's ass is right where Japan. So sorry, Japan. I should have left that part out, but anyways, the elephant occurs in Hindu, Chinese, and the indigenous peoples of America. So the guys that saying, oh, this is all bullshit. Well, it's bullshit that was shared by 3 different cultures that were apparently had no contact with each other. And it all happens to date back to the sacrifice stuff. That's the very story of our soul's journey through heaven. Take that, bullshit. No, I love it when people challenge me. So that's why when the guy made that comment, I was like, yes, someone to help me keep going, right? When I get a whole bunch of people that just keep agreeing with everything, it's hard to keep going. Because I'm like, oh, everyone already agrees. What's the point, right? It's not until someone disagrees with me that I'm like, oh yeah, you fucker, I'll prove you wrong. I'm just kidding. It's terrible. Alright, so we covered everything except for the gravity well stuff and the Egyptian stuff. Oh, and the Anubis. Let's go with the gravity well. No, we'll save gravity well for last. Let's do Egypt quick. Well, let's go into the shorts where we left off there, just to make sure, right? So we did the cane thing. We got that. Oh, we left off at Karatepe. Alright, so we left off at Karatepe. Let's see where we go next. The Beetlejuice story. Not to give away all the story of Beetlejuice, but it happens to have that giant serpent creature in it. It's got the Beetlejuice star. The Beetlejuice movie happens to be the story about people traveling through the afterlife and what do they call it, like purgatory and stuff. It's a really good movie. Fuck, I love that movie. And luckily I got to see the new one in the theater with my wife, so that was sweet. It's like a dream come true. Right, here we get into more of like the kneeling stuff. I don't know if anyone remembers when they had the big kneeling protests. I was always like, what's the big deal? Like, is there some occult symbology to kneeling? And I kind of remembered that it's like genuflecting from church. Every time you walk past the altar, you're supposed to kneel, right? So this is where you get into the bent knee. There's also the South American guy who, what is it? His tomb lid Pakal. His knee is bent in the same fashion. Another one here, JJ shared this one, so big thanks to her. She always shares the cool stuff from all the wild museums from all over the world. And yeah, big thanks to her for that and more. She's a really cool person too. I know not everyone gets along in the ancient mystery community, but I try to the best I can. And then there's serpents around his neck, I think, which you get into those holding the serpent thing. We won't go into any other puns about holding the serpent. And then, oh yeah, the Asian. This is also a picture I took from the Raw Museum. And they got all these statues around like funeral things. So like tombs have these. And they have the same thing with the bird from the winged disc, standing on the ox for the how to reach heaven, to become like immortal, have to sacrifice one of those oxes. And then he's got his knee bent like Orion. At this point, is anyone else like freaked out? I know, like when I started learning about this, I'm like, oh my god, right? It's almost unreal how it all ties in together. Alright, so I guess we're on to the gravity well stuff already. So maybe we won't do gravity wells last, because it doesn't seem like that's how I have it set up. Right, so if anyone remembers that red ring, like we talked at the beginning of the show, that's where you get the red ring. And I found out that at first I was thinking they meant like the stars spinning in the sky, but it turns out no, that's not the spinning it was talking about. It was talking about the spinning of, what is it called? Oh yeah, the celestial equator. So if anyone wants to go into Wikipedia and read all about the celestial equator, we could do like 2 hours just on that. So I don't want to do that, but we're just going to show that that's what the red ring is for now. And it just so happens, like this sort of map thing about the celestial equator and how it maps on the Earth, the ecliptic and all this other stuff, happens to be the ley line pattern. So that's what we'll bring up next. I know I promised to talk about Egypt next, but I'm a freaking liar. Bullshit liar, just like that guy said. At least in some cases. No one tells the truth all the time, right? Especially if you don't know any better. Do I? Alright, so when I got into researching ley lines, I guess I should bring it up in a better order. Yeah, here it is. So remember how I got like really bad memory, and it's a result of like multiple concussions, sadly. I managed to crack my skull open with a crowbar and a bunch of other cases, and if that doesn't explain a lot of this, I don't know what does. I shouldn't laugh and make fun of people with head injuries, but yeah. When I got my first really bad head injury, I started getting into drawing ley lines, and I got help from a researcher. Let's bring up her work. This is a map of ley lines. That's why I mentioned that. No, there's a really nice lady from, where is it again? Montana in the US. Somewhere around there, I think. Western coast area, or no, below the US, or below the Canada border, so probably around there somewhere. Anyway, she does really cool work about the Montana, what are they called, their Joe Rogan did an episode, and I don't think, sadly, they didn't give a name shout out to Julie Ryder, and some other people tried to take the claim for the research of the Montana megaliths. And I know there's a whole bunch of like internal fighting and debating about that. So I'm not going to cover too much about like the fighting part of it, but just to give a shout out to Julie Ryder. And she talked to me about this ley line, this one in purple here that goes right past like South America really nicely and such. So that's the difference. And for when I started working on the ley lines, I got that ley line. So I drew that one with Google Earth. I'm like, all right, we got one ley line. And then if anyone's heard about the ley lines from the new Indiana Jones movie or game for like, what is it, Xbox, I think. Anyways, it's called the Great Circle, the Indiana Jones game. That Great Circle line is this other purple one here. And it goes through places like, where are the places? Easter Island, the Egyptian the Egyptian Great Pyramid. What was the other one? What's the one in Southeast Asia? Angkor Wat. And keep going right around the earth, and then you got that ley line. So that's how I started. Got the concussion, drew these two ley lines, and then I started like thinking to myself, hey, this ley line pattern looks like a pattern. Can I fill in the rest? And from the help of the concussion, what it was I started to realize that if you took lines like for the equinoxes, like the equator, the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, the Arctic Circle, and you start filling in all those lines, you end up with a pattern like the blue pattern. Like you see how there's purple and blue on this map? And then I realized that the map that Julie had made, or Julie and that Great Circle map from Indiana Jones, there's another movie that talks about it, and I forget the name of it right now, but I do have the DVD. I bought it. It's a guy from England. He talks about Great Circle lines, and apparently it's like tried to be covered up. And there we come into the cover up again. But anyways, if you take that map and my map, you just twist them slightly, they actually match. So when I draw ley line maps, I usually draw like the one that's easiest to make, but the ancient one is like slightly off. And the reason the modern one's easier to make is you can just measure off like an existing globe, how it gives you all the lines like the equator. And then the trick is you just draw great circles. And a great circle is the same as an equator, where it's just like a full circle around the Earth. It doesn't get smaller and smaller when you get closer to the bottom of the planet. You just keep drawing full ones each time. And then you end up with this pattern. Oh, and then this picture on the side. Who made this picture? Fuck, I wish I could give them a name drop. But they show how the temples on this purple line that Julie was talking about, they're almost identical. So isn't that wild, man? Alright, so we talked a long time on that one, so we'll try to speed it up. Speed it up, man. Your wife's trying to sleep for work. Alright, I shouldn't laugh. She's probably going to kill me. I'll be doing the dishes for the rest of my life. Foot rubs for 9 hours a day. Not that I hate foot rubs, they're great. Alright, so the celestial equator, the ecliptic, you start to see how the ley line map from drawing great circles actually matches the celestial equator. So isn't it neat that the Ahura Mazda symbol and this whole celestial equator is actually like a hidden technology tree of ancient people that shows how the Earth is actually put together. And if people haven't noticed, we'll cover how the Earth looks with ley lines. I didn't even bring any of those slides. Alright, well, that kind of sucks. But anyways, if you look at how the ley lines match on the continents, when you have like the full ley line map, it actually outlines almost every continent perfectly, especially when you get into Australia and Asia and India and even New Zealand. So you'll have to check my other videos out for that. But yeah, when you watch those, your mind should be blown. If not, you're like the other guy. Screw him. No, I'm just kidding. I appreciate him. He helps keep me going. Alright, so some of the things I learned from this technology of like the Great Circle maps is how the cycle of ice ages goes. I know when people draw where like the polar, or what is it called, the wandering magnetic north, could be a different type of wandering, but this is roughly the pattern I gathered from it. I know the data and research shows that the pattern's slightly different around here, but I don't know, their data could just be wrong, or my data's wrong, who knows. Probably mine's wrong. But to me, it explains why the continent was split up so much, and we'll see that and more, hopefully. Did I bring that one? Yes. Oh yeah, there it is. So we covered that one. Oh, and these ley lines, not only do they outline the continents, but they also happen to map usually some of the biggest cracks in the Earth's crust. You can see here that it doesn't match it perfectly, but in other ley line videos I show where it really does, and it's intense. So that biggest crack in the Earth crust also happens to be the line of sacrifice, or some people call it the line of Apollo, or Apollo, like the one from the moon mission. So you can see some of the things that are on the Apollo line. Some giant sinkhole that's really cool. The birth of Jesus, St. Ivan, or the Holy Land Wars. St. Ivan, I think of the Rila Monastery. Where is that? Oh yeah, Bulgaria. The birthplace of Hitler. Not that that's related, but on this it is. Boston Airport, the 9/11 hijacking, where Miss USA died. Remember we talked about that? The Orion Tower happens to fall right on it. Yeah, the Orion Tower, year of sacrifice. The Pentagon. So you've noticed a little bit of a trend here, how the Boston Airport, the Pentagon, and I think there was another one to do with 9/11. But anyways, all these 9/11 ones, I had a guest on the show. Remember, we're going to name drop again? I had Art Olivier, and everyone's thinking, who the hell was Art Olivier? He was the guy that ran to be the governor of California, and he almost won, but Schwarzenegger beat him. So I was like, running against Schwarzenegger, yeah, it's going to be hard to beat him. And Art Olivier was also almost the vice president of the United States. So isn't that kind of freaky that I did a ley line special about ley lines and sacrifice with a guy that was like practically the vice president of the United States? Like, mind blown. Like, especially when I'm just an armchair researcher who happened to get a coin from light beings. Next thing you know, you're talking to the vice president about sacrifices. We're going to be getting into where the coin comes into this. This part really freaks me out. But anyways, the Mecca Cube, Muhammad is on this line. Mount Hermon, where the fallen angels came to earth. Mount Olympus, where the gods lived. Stonehenge, River Fail. Some people make fun of that river, but I just think it's a cool river. Some legendary woman. Like, what's not to beat about that? What's better, I mean. World Trade Center. Oh yeah, that's the other World Trade Center thing for the Art Olivier show. Make sure you check out Art's websites and his he does a movie about it, and yeah, YouTube channel. So if you can go onto his YouTube channel, watch all his videos, and just say, hey, Leland sent us to you, and just try to be polite. Ask or leave some great comments for him. I really appreciate it, because I can't believe I was fortunate enough to have him on the show. You want to talk about the worst demonic dream I ever had, like the Skinwalker dreams? I had one the night before I was on the show with Art Olivier. And I didn't know that Art Olivier was going to talk about sacrifice. All I knew is that he was into ley lines. So my mind was blown that I had the worst demonic Skinwalker dream I've ever had. And then the next day I did the show with Art Olivier. I was like, oh my god. My mind was like literally spinning at that point. Worse than getting hit in the head with the crowbar. His cracked skull wasn't as worse as that. As much as you can believe. Alright, so Mike Tyson was also born there. I think even Tyson Fury was as well, but on like the England side. I always hoped that Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson were going to fight each other to bring this whole thing in together. When I said that, people were like, oh yeah, right. It turned out they almost did. They were in negotiations to fight, but then as people have heard, Mike Tyson's career went down the tubes. He had some bad health problems, and then when he fought Jake Paul, he just looked so terrible. But actually, when I met Mike Tyson in person at the same convention, I met that cool Persian guy. I got the demonic feeling from him. So when Mike Tyson says that the God of War is with him, I don't doubt it for 1 second. Like, my hair literally stood on end. And Mike Tyson's been a hero of mine since I was a kid. The only other time that's happened is when I stood next to a polar bear and when I stood next to, what's that famous astronaut? Buzz Aldrin. So I don't know how Buzz Aldrin got a demon attached to him. I'm assuming it's from when he was on the moon. I know some people debate that he never even went to the moon, but I can't understand how else he would get a demon that strong attached to him. And if anyone's not sure, like why would a demon be on the moon? Remember how we talked about the jade rabbit, the moon, earlier in the show? It turns out that's some of the ancient history too, how they talk about how the moon is like a prison for the world's worst demons, and that's the only place they could keep them. If anyone knows the story about Jesus and how he used to do demonic, exorcisms, and the story of the village that hates Jesus or hated him. So Jesus went to this village. The people are like, hey, get rid of the demons. All these people are all demonic and we need someone to get the demons out. So Jesus did the rituals, got the demons out, and sadly the demons decided to get revenge on Jesus and the village. So they went at all the sheeps and like all the animals and livestock, and they took the livestock and ran it all off a cliff. So all the food for the entire village was wiped out in one day. I guess they couldn't just collect the bodies and dry it for some reason, but you want some of your livestock alive so that you can keep making new animals. So that village just hated Jesus after that. They banished him and said, yep, we never want Jesus back again. So that's where you get into the idea where some of the biblical stories, they talk about how when the Hebrews were ordered to wipe out cultures and steal all of their land and money, they often said that they also had to kill everything, just not just the women, the children, but they also had to kill all their animals. So that's where the idea comes from, is you want to wipe out demons, you have to kill everything that lives. And we're not endorsing killing. Remember, Jesus is the way. And this line is also where you find a lot of volcanoes in South America where they were doing those sacrifices of the beautiful women like Miss America. Oh, and this is the last one. So just behold, just like that coin we were talking about before, guess where that city was, where Cain came down and built Tenochtitlan? That's where the god of war instructed it to be built, was on this line. Fucking brutal. Alright. So now we get into the technology. This is what, Europa. You can see all the ley line maps. I know this is a jumbled mess, but just to show that it matches a little bit there. Here on Mars is where it matches the ley line of sacrifice that we just talked about. That's this one that goes through Mars's biggest volcano. Isn't that fucking unreal? Our three biggest volcanoes minus Mount Olympus. I know Mount Olympus is bigger, but just for the ones that lined up on the sacrifice line, blew my mind. Uh-oh, losing my voice. We only got about 5-10 minutes left, I hope, so we'll rifle through this. Now this is a moon of Jupiter and a moon of Earth. You can see that the ley line patterns are pretty much like a universal gravity well field, and it creates the same type of shapes on each planet. We could do a whole episode about how Earth and Mars are almost identical in so many ways, but we'll have to do that in another episode. But here you can see the moon. It's got like the giant craters. Both the crater lines match. This little spot, I guess I should be pointing with the mouse. These spots here, they match the lines coming out of it, the giant craters. So that's where we're getting into this lost technology of the Anunnaki, or the winged disc is actually used to create all the planets and moons. Or maybe not even used to create it, just naturally occurring. So the Piri-Reis map is arguably one of the oldest ley line maps. So I just showed an example of how the ones that I've been creating here are actually very similar. It also gives the location away for Atlantis, but we'll have to do another episode on that. It's like, sorry guys, if you want to know where Atlantis is, that's next episode. Make sure to like, sub, and share. And here we get into how the ley lines actually map out the entire continent shape. You can see that that's where what the North Pole used to look like before it got split up by the wandering North Pole. And then there's the South Pole, what it used to look like, including Zealandia. And after it got split, how it looks. And I'm assuming the wandering pattern also occurs in the south. So that's why Australia used to be frozen during the Ice Age, and why Antarctica used to have tropical trees at one point. This type of pattern can also be applied to the sun. You can see the sun has different features. It happens to match the fleur-de-lis. I doubt the French knew that, but you never know. They know a lot. Oh, and here's where it matches Jupiter or Saturn. I can't remember which. Oh yeah, this one's Saturn. You can see how it sort of makes an eye, and the cloud formations match. But I got way too many lines on here, so it looks a little bit cluttered. Oh, and this one's Antoine, if anyone's seen his Wonderful People YouTube channel. He talks about how modern gravity wells and the maps that I make actually have a lot of similarities. So I just thought I'd share that. Shout out to Antoine. I do watch a lot of actual scientific channels and information, not just the woo-woo stuff, but I try to connect the two. Woo-woo. Alright, so there we go, cyclones on Jupiter. Oh, hey, honey. So, I'm almost done recording, so I'll be quiet soon.
Oh, that's okay.
Alright. So we got the Sun, the Milky Way, Jupiter, and some of the ley line patterns on Earth and how they match. So this is basically the technology. Not only could we create planets, but I think we could even create human species. Like, just given the technology I have from the gravity wells now, I could terraform a planet, not only to like have like breathable air and land and all that stuff, but I could even create species. So that's why I always kind of find it weird when people are talking about trying to preserve species. Not that we should wipe them out, but hey, if I wanted to create a human species with like infinite money and infinite resources, and they're like, here, just go at it, I could create fucking humans from scratch. It's kind of weird to think about it, but that the Anunnaki technology, that's just about how advanced it really is. You can use it to create a fucking universe, for God's sakes. This one's Venus. You can see how Venus, the patterns in it match the ley lines pretty cool. And, oh yeah, remember I was talking about the different humans. It's like, yeah, that was my proof for that, is Australia has a very unique ley line field. Are you staying up for a while?
Yeah.
Alright. I'm almost done recording. It's offline, but it is like a 2-hour long show, so
That's okay.
I'll hopefully be done soon. So yeah, there's where Zealandia happens to fall on it. Oh, and is that it for the ley lines? Sweet. Yeah, that's it for the ley lines. Right, the next topic for the show. We're almost done them all. Do you find it like really hot in here? Or is
Yes.
it just me? Can you turn the heat down? That'd be great. I'm like sweating buckets. Right, so the next one will be the Anubis slides. Remember how the Anubis stuff was like part of the outstretched arms and whatnot? We'll cover Anubis next. So how I got involved with Anubis is my family in Ontario actually bought this house like a long time ago, like the 1950s. And not to make fun of the house or whatever, but it's actually been known as kind of like a haunted house. Some horrible things have happened there. So I won't get into too much of that because it's terrible. And it just so happens that like this weird Anubis thing was actually found inside of this house. And it wasn't from our family, and so we don't know how long it's been in the house. The house probably dates back to roughly when Canada was first had Europeans colonized, I guess I should say. Here we got an Anubis picture of like Anubis being popular in Bulgaria. Here's Anubis in Egypt and how he does the opening of the mouth. And here's the amulet itself. And I have brought it to different museums and got it 3D scanned and tested. And a lot of the properties of this amulet are very strange. It's almost positive to be identified as like a type of steel similar to Damascus steel, where it's like really old but also rust proof. And the amulet also has an opening in the mouth thing. And it's kind of nice that my wife actually woke up just in time. Because do you remember when we first met. She was a viewer on one of my podcasts. Was it for gaming or was it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then I did a contest, and I'm like, if anyone wants to win the Anubis amulet, enter the contest, and we'll spin a wheel. So we spun the wheel, and she happened to win. So I never met her at this point, and I mailed her a copy of the Anubis amulet that I got 3D printed. And then years later, we ended up married. So it's kind of neat how that worked out. And neat how she woke up just in time for the show, but you have to work tomorrow, so you're not staying up too late, are you?
No, I just slept like 6 hours.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, you can even wake up soon.
Oh.
Right, so when I researched the amulet, I found out that's why he has this weird mouth thing, is I think it connects to the opening of the mouth ceremony. I know people are thinking, oh god, Anubis in Canada, but we've already talked about Anubis in Bulgaria, matching very similar to the amulet. And there's one from Sumeria that has the open mouth thing. Oh, it's terrifying. Even looking at that kind of reminds me of the skinwalker demons, right? Or the Greys. It's pretty freaky. The Egyptians often depicted Anubis sitting in a similar fashion, even with like the same lines on his ribs and stuff. And the hole in his neck is almost where he has the ribbons supposed to be tied, and his eyes or his ears are up. And I'm pretty sure, like in modern times, dogs' ears have to be cut to do that. So having both depicted that way is almost like pretty wild. This Anubis, which one is this one? Oh, this is the Phoenician. So the Phoenicians also had an Anubis. Isn't that interesting? Oh, and then this one's the tablet from the Raw Museum. You can tell. No, it's me. It wasn't my wife. So the Anubis and the 7 stars. There we have like the 7 Pleiades, the 7th heaven, and the sacred tree. All the symbology on like a Sumerian type tablet from the Raw Museum, and with Anubis to boot, and the horned beast, almost like he's chasing the horned beast to show it's part of the ritual. So this is, oh yeah, and this is another picture of the Aztec Anubis. His name is called Xotl, and isn't it wild that he looks so similar to the amulet, I guess to me, with the open mouth, the way he's sitting. And my cousin actually happened to draw Anubis for me. I can't remember, I was doing some project, asked her if she could draw Anubis, and she's like one of the 1 in a million talented artists that can do photorealistic drawings. So she was doing the drawing for me, and she just did it however she wanted to depict Anubis. This one is from Artemis. Oh, remember we talked about Apollo? Now we're talking about Artemis, his sister. I didn't even realize that's who that was. And she walks around with the dog that guards in the afterlife. So here's one connection I just learned as we were doing the episode now. Oh, and there's another look at the cuneiform tablet that has Anubis, arguably Anubis, and the 7 stars. That one's wild. I should do a short just for that one. I got to get a better picture from the museum. Hopefully we'll go back soon. And there's another one of the Dresden Codex. Oh yeah, I was going to mention the Dresden Codex because when I first got into researching stuff like the Amesha Spenta, I went to the museum in, I think it was, no, there was a library in Kitchener. So I got to read the Popol Vuh there, and I started to go through different pages of it, finding different information. And the Popol Vuh, it talks about how the hero twins had to fight like the immortal gods, and the immortal gods were so fascinated because the hero twins could do a ritual where they would kill someone and then bring them back to life, and the gods were like, oh my god, how are these twins doing this? So they were so fascinated by it that they told them that they wanted to do the same thing. So the hero twins killed them and then didn't bring them back. So that's how the hero twins managed to defeat the immortals. Well, I guess they're not that immortal if they can actually be defeated, right? So yeah, that's the comparison between the two. I don't know, to me it's so similar it freaks me out, but other people are probably going to look at that and be like, it's so different. But to each their own, right? And here's, what is it, the Hermetic Anubis? I don't know, what is that from? Do you think that's from Greek or something? Hermes?
I don't know. Oh, yes. I looked it up. I know a whole bunch about it.
Yeah, so Hermes, the Hermetic Anubis. Oh, this explains where this guy's from. Oh, he's actually from Japan, not Sumeria. So I'm glad I was able to correct that. I think that's a picture from J.J. Ainsworth. Yeah, it is. The megalithic maiden. Very use photo. So thanks for sharing that again, J.J. And Baba, or the name for grandmother in, what is that, Slavic traditions. I know for Ukrainian, that's grandma. It's the Akkadian goddess of healing. She sits in the Sirius dog star position, holding both arms out. She heals by transforming people into dogs. And after the Great Flood, imagine that's how Anubis came to be. But after the Great Flood, helped breathe life into mankind, just like the breath of life ritual that Anubis does. Here's another picture of the haunted house where the Anubis amulet was found. God, I miss that farm. As scary as it was, I still miss it. Oh yeah, and there's another picture. I said I didn't have any pictures of the ley lines outdraw the continents, so there's where it does. This one ley line symbol here by Africa, that also happens to be the biggest crater ever discovered on the Earth, right in the center of where that is, but they don't know what created the crater. They said they used to think it was a meteor impact, but now they're still trying to figure it out. And I think it's wild that that's also where one of the biggest portals are. Oh, and you can see the elephant head. Here's where the ley line connects where the elephant's eye is, and there's the tears draining down on the Amazon. It just so happens that on Mars, the biggest canyon there also matches the location where the Amazon River is. And on Mars, where the biggest volcano, what is it, Olympus Mons, it matches where Hawaii is. So I thought that's kind of neat. I thought we covered all the Anubis stuff, but it looks like I missed a few. There's the 3D scan that I had made. If anyone wants an amulet, maybe I could do another giveaway, but I can't marry you this time.
No, definitely not.
And then there's the Anubis and my cousin Drew. Isn't it a bit freaky? It's funny because it matches Xochitl, and it's got the cross symbol for the whole ritual, and my cousin knew nothing about that stuff, so it's kind of weird that she drew this picture. And I put this picture up in my wall where I have my video game room, and I kind of don't want the kids going in there, like all the nieces and nephews, because I don't want them to ruin my video game collection. It just so happens that when they walk into the room, they refuse to go in, and they run away because they're so terrified of this picture hanging up on the wall. I was going to bring it back to our apartment. I'm like, hey, maybe I should leave it there to protect my video games. It's kind of mean, but hey, video games are life. Just kidding. Alright. So we covered Anubis. What's the last one to cover? We'll do Egypt, and then we'll go to the last one. It'll be where I am now, up north. Oh, thank God, Egypt's a short one. So we just talked about how the shafts on the pyramid of Egypt, they match the Orion's belt. So again, with the whole idea of why did the shafts of the pyramid point there, now we have a better idea. The reason they're pointed there is because that's where the ritual is. It talks about human life and our journey through the solar system and all that. And why does it point it the other way? And then we can see that it's got the Big Dipper and Draco and all that. I do a whole episode about that stuff with the research up north. So we'll be going to that very shortly. There's the picture we already talked about, the King Tut and the chair from his tomb. And then we look at Egypt, and you can start to understand why they got all these giant oxes in their symbology. Now you know why, if you watch the episode or you believe something else from what I'm thinking, and then you don't know why. But if you do, then you do. Oh, and remember how we talked about the multiple meanings of stuff? The winged disc, I noticed, is like a portal, like a technology of like UFOs. in some ways. Other ways, it's the stars above. And the third way, we actually talked about like the regalia from Japan, how it's a mirror. So this picture here is actually on a giant, he's standing on a giant ox. So there's the ox symbology again, we know why. The three things he's holding there, I believe that'd be Orion's belt. And then the looking like opium would actually be the shamanic element. And then the mirror is like a scrying mirror, where in Egypt, all the people had to line up to talk to the gods and use mirrors. So it's almost like we got the symbology here for the ritual, for the animal sacrifice, and how that was used like in Cain and Abel's time to communicate with God. And then we had a mirror from Egypt showing basically the same stuff. And then the Eye of Ra was actually, or what is the eye again? I think it's Ra, but it's supposed to be like a protection. So it's almost like the first antivirus symbol. Sort of like, what's the late great, what was the guy that was killed from the antivirus stuff? People want to put it in the chat. Oh, John McAfee. Poor guy, right? Like, some people say he committed suicide, but I don't really believe that. Probably another sacrifice, if I had to guess. Allegedly. Alright, so we covered the Egyptian, and the last one will be the material up north. Oh, thank God, this is a short one too. Alright, so remember how we talked about the Magi and how they had screwed over people in the past? I think it was one of Darius's reigns where he got screwed over by the Magi and then his whole empire fell apart. We talk about how the Bulgarian people actually used to have red hair back in the day. There's some of the evidence for that. The Thracians, what are they also called? The people of Magog. They were doing the cannibal stuff, so that's why they had to get wiped out. Darius was also an adherent of Zoroastrianism, so we talked about that a lot. Ahura Mazda. Wow, this one actually had more information than I thought. So up north, where I'm staying now and where that mountain is with the sacrifice that you see me take pictures of, there's the other picture about, it's not your typical Stonehenge up here, but it's the kind that matches New York and North Salem. They're sort of standing stones that are propped up on like pyramid type rocks. So yeah, these things are actually still up here in Ontario. It's hidden pretty good, but there is a few maps that you can find online and how to visit. Just make sure you don't destroy anything, or I'll be very pissed, and a lot of other people will be too. There's the Holy Mountain. There's basically where I was standing in those pictures. And you can actually climb this mountain without being an avid climber, because there's a trail that actually winds its way up gradually all the way to the top. And it's actually divided in half, sort of like the pillars of Solomon's Temple are the two pillars from, Boaz, and the other from Freemasonry. And the two pillars that you see on the winged disc symbology. Here's my favorite Freemason artwork. What I find it so neat about it is this mountain that we just showed is, I believe, this one. The map of like how the road winds down from it matches how it used to look before they renovated the roads. So I just included that, and it also talks about reaching the seventh heaven and the Eye of Ra that we had seen before in Noah's Ark. So it's neat that from darkness to light, the two moon and sun that we see in the symbology for. So shout out to the Freemasons for sharing that one. Alright, so we covered the up north stuff too. Gravity wells, first north, Egypt, religion, sacrifice, trees, Zoroastrian, and the light beings. Alright. And where did we leave off on this? We did Beetlejuice, that one, the gravity wells. Alright, so we left off here. We might finish at 216 if we're lucky. Alright, so I believe this technology not only can like terraform planets, but also shows how you can make the serpents like align to the equinox and make these wild shadow things. Exactly the same technology you would need to engineer the moon and the sun to make a perfect eclipse. Like remember how we talked about terraforming? and how it lines up with Mars. Yeah, so that's the winged disc episode. And yeah, it's a lot of personal stuff in here, so people want to make fun of it. It kind of does hit me close to home, but I can take it. So if you want to leave comments, don't be afraid. You can agree or disagree or correct any of the things that I got wrong. I really appreciate when people do that because I get things wrong all the time. And what else should we say to close, eh? Yeah, thanks for everyone. There is like a 3-minute little clip version of this, but you can imagine this was a lot to try to cram into 3 minutes. So it kind of doesn't make sense, and I talk a little too fast. But if you want to share that to try to get the word out for some of this, and if we're the only people that watch it, like 5 or 10 people, for me it was just kind of nice to share it with anyone. So, and just to tell the story and to like sort of summarize the whole experience with getting that coin, how it all sort of connected together. Oh, and the other part that coin connects together, the other side was Montezuma and Montezuma's revenge. So maybe this video will be some sort of revenge on people that's worse than diarrhea. No, and where I'm up north by that human sacrifice offering thing is also the world's best gold mine. So that's another one of the weird coincidences with the Anunnaki gold. And shout out to Ricky Barron. If I could add music to this episode, I would put his gold song. Make sure to check that out on YouTube too. Alright, thanks a million. Like, share, and sub. See you later, everyone. Bye for now. I can let my wife get to sleep for work. Later.